110, then 183. That is one heart in one body, and only 2 minutes sit between those two numbers. Nobody ran a race, nobody got startled by a barking dog in an alley. In the actual study behind those numbers, a person simply walked up an ordinary staircase, the kind you have in your house or your office, and kept going. 60 seconds in, the heart had already jumped from about 110 beats a minute to roughly 170. Another minute of climbing, and it reached 183. That is nearly the ceiling for a young heart. And all it took was a flight of stairs and about the time it takes to boil an egg. Hold on to that jump, because it is only the first strange number, and I have 2 more waiting for you, and they are every bit as odd. Here is the second one. 3.87. That is how many times your own body weight presses down through the front of your knee at one particular instant on one single step, going up, not going down, going up, which everybody thinks is the gentle direction. Your kneecap, that little bone you can wiggle with your finger, is riding underneath a force close to 4 times everything you weigh. If you tip the skull at 150 pounds, then for a flicker of time there is something like 600 pounds squeezing through the joint at the front of your knee. And you do this, what, a dozen times before breakfast, without so much as a wince. And now the third number, 80%. That is the slice of every ordinary walking stride, stairs or flat ground, no difference, where your entire body weight is balanced on one single leg, one foot. The other foot is off the floor, swinging through the air, contributing nothing. For most of your walking life, you are technically standing on one leg, catching yourself, falling forward, and catching yourself again, over and over, and you have the nerve to call it walking. So look at what is actually sitting on the table in front of us. A heart that comes within a whisker of red lining. A kneecap taking a blow like it wandered into a boxing ring and forgot to duck. And a balance system running a one-legged tightrope act, step after step after step, on a rope you cannot even see. 3 suspects, 1 small crime scene, which is nothing more glamorous than a stairwell. And the whole affair is over in about 4 minutes, from the bottom step to the top. Something in that little scrap of time is doing serious work on you. Real work. Measurable work. The kind you can put a number on. And the funny thing, the thing that hooked me and I hope hooks you, is that 4 minutes is such a tiny amount of time. You cannot boil pasta in 4 minutes. You cannot get through one side of a phonograph record. And yet in 4 minutes on a staircase, 3 completely different systems in your body are getting interrogated. Hard. And you stroll off at the top thinking about nothing but where you left your keys. So let us do what any decent investigator would do. Let us climb up slowly, one flight at a time, and figure out exactly what is happening to each of the 3 suspects, and then figure out the thing nobody tells you, which is why so little time can do so much. Now, I want to start with the strangest clue of the whole business, and it is a real study, done properly, with a control group and everything. Somebody actually sat down and asked a very simple question. If 4 minutes on a staircase does all this dramatic stuff to your heart, does it also make you feel any different? Do you feel more energetic? Do you feel more tired? A reasonable question. You would think a big physiological event like that would announce itself. You would think your body would send up a flare. Here is what they did. They took 36 young adults, average age about 21, most of them women, and they split them into 2 groups. One group got up and did a single 4-minute bout of stair walking at their own comfortable pace, up and down a flight of 16 steps, the perfectly normal number of steps in a normal staircase. The other group just sat there in a chair, the control, doing nothing interesting at all. And then they measured. And what they found in the climbers is exactly what those opening numbers promised. The heart rate went up significantly, no question about it. The statistics are rock solid. The rated perceived exertion, which is just a fancy way of saying how hard the person felt they were working, went up enormously. That number practically shot through the roof. The body, in other words, was screaming. Every honest physical measurement said, this is real. This is effort. Something is happening here. And then they asked the climbers how they felt. Did they feel more energy? Did they feel more fatigue? And the answer, statistically, was a shrug. No significant change in their feelings of energy. No significant change in their feelings of fatigue. The body threw a small fit, and the mind, sitting right upstairs, barely noticed a thing. Now that to me is a genuine little mystery, and I do not want us to rush past it, because it is the whole case in miniature. The instruments say one thing, the person says another. The heart is pounding at a rate that, if you saw it on a monitor, might make a nurse walk a little faster. And the owner of that heart says, I feel about the same as when I sat down. That gap between what the body does and what you feel it doing, that gap is where all the interesting physics is hiding. So write it on the wall of our little detective's office. The body screams, the mind shrugs. Why? Do not answer yet. We have not met the suspects properly. We only have their fingerprints. Let us follow the first one, the heart, because it left the boldest set of prints at the scene. The heart is not being modest here, not even a little. Remember our opening jump, 110 up to 183 in 2 minutes. Let me tell you why that particular staircase is such a bully. When you climb, you are not just moving your body forward the way you do on flat ground. You are lifting your entire weight straight up against gravity, step after step, and gravity never takes a break and never gives you a discount. On a flat sidewalk, you glide. Your body is a pendulum, swinging along, hardly spending anything. But a staircase strips the pendulum trick away. Every step is a small, brutal deadlift of your whole self, done with your legs, and the legs are the biggest muscles you own. Big muscles are hungry muscles. They demand oxygen, and they demand it right now, and the only delivery surface in town is your blood. So the heart is ordered to pump harder and faster, and it obeys, and up goes the rate, 110, 170, 183. Here is where it gets almost unfair, in the best way. There is a study of people with real heart disease, coronary artery disease, 18 of them, average age around 61. Not young, not athletes, sick hearts, careful doctors. And instead of putting them on the long, gentle exercise program you would expect, the researchers had them do something that sounds almost reckless. 3 short bursts of vigorous stair climbing, about 90 seconds each, 6 flights at a go, 3 times a week for 12 weeks. Add up the actual climbing, and it is only about 7 minutes of exercise in a whole session. 7 minutes. And during those supervised sessions, the stair climbers pushed their hearts to 101% of their peak heart rate. 101%. They were, briefly, redlining on purpose, these people with damaged hearts doing it under a doctor's eye. The other group, doing the traditional longer, steadier exercise, only reached about 89% of their peak. The stairs pushed harder in less time by a wide and statistically airtight margin. Now you would expect a fragile heart poked that hard to complain, or worse. But watch what happened over the 12 weeks. Their VO2 peak, which is the single best number we have for how fit a heart and pair of lungs really are, how much oxygen your body can grab and use when you are working flat out, climbed from about 21.5 up to 25. That is a jump of roughly 17%. And here is the part that made me sit up. That improvement was statistically the same as what the other group got from a much longer, much more time-consuming traditional cardiac rehab program. Same result. A fraction of the minutes. So we have our first solid clue, and it points somewhere strange. The heart does not seem to care very much about how long you exercise. It seems to care tremendously about how hard, and for a staircase, hard comes almost for free, because gravity is doing the coaching. A few short bouts, near the top of what the heart can give, and the heart quietly rebuilds itself to be stronger. That is not intuition. That is a measured, repeated, published fact. But a good detective does not fall in love with the first clue. The moment something looks this clean, this convenient, you have to get suspicious. Because there is an obvious, deflating explanation sitting right there, and if we do not deal with it honestly, the whole case is worthless. What if the staircase is not really doing anything special to the heart at all? What if climbing stairs is just a sneaky way of measuring how fit you already were? That would be a very different story. And it is exactly the sort of trap we need to walk into next, carefully, with our eyes open. So let us walk right into the trap and see if it snaps shut on us. Over in Spain, some cardiologists had a clever, almost lazy idea. Instead of strapping a patient to a treadmill and running the whole elaborate machinery of a stress test, they said, "Look, there is a staircase in the hospital. Climb 4 flights. We will hold a stopwatch." And what they found is that the time on that stopwatch tells you something startlingly precise about the engine inside the chest. Climb those 4 flights in about 45 to 55 seconds, and you are running at roughly 10 metabolic equivalents. That is a fancy phrase that just means 10 times the energy you burn sitting still, and it puts you in fine cardiovascular shape. The people who managed 10 of those units did it in 46 seconds, give or take. The ones a notch lower took about 58 seconds. And the ones who were struggling, down below 8 units, needed 82 seconds, and they wobbled through them. So here is the deflating thought, the one I warned you about. Maybe the staircase is nothing but a cheap measuring stick. Maybe the fit heart climbs fast because it was already fit, and the tired heart climbs slow because it was already tired, and the stairs themselves did nothing at all. They just reported the score. If that is true, then all my excitement is hot air. Telling a person to climb stairs to get a strong heart would be like telling a person to step on a scale to lose weight. The scale measures, it does not reduce. That is a serious objection, and you cannot argue your way out of it with enthusiasm. You have to go back to the evidence and ask a sharper question. Not, do fit people climb well? Of course they do. The real question is, if you take an unfit person and make them climb over and over for weeks, does the heart actually change? Does the measuring stick turn into a tool? And here the coronary patients answer us plainly. Their hearts were not merely being read like a thermometer. Their peak oxygen capacity climbed by about 17% across those 12 weeks. The stick reshaped the thing it was measuring. So the red herring is dead. The staircase measures fitness, yes, but it also builds it. Both at once. Same act. That is the first satisfying click in this case, and it tells us the heart is not just an innocent bystander that got timed. It is a suspect that responds. Good. But a case with only one suspect is a boring case, and the body has more than a heart. So let us swing the flashlight downward to the joints doing all this work, because there is a second front here and the news is not entirely friendly. When you push yourself up one single step, the big muscle on the front of your thigh, the quadriceps, has to haul your whole weight upward against gravity, and it does not pull gently. At the hardest instant of that push, that muscle pulls with a force close to 4 times your body weight. Say that slowly. 4 times your body weight generated inside your own leg to lift you the height of one stair. The muscles behind the knee and down in the calf pitch in too, but the quadriceps is the workhorse, and it does not work for free. Where does all that pulling go? It funnels through your kneecap. Your kneecap is a little pulley, a bone floating in the tendon, pressed against the end of your thigh bone, and every ounce of that muscular pull squeezes it into the joint underneath. On flat ground, strolling across a room, the force pressing the kneecap against the bone is less than 1 times your body weight. Barely a whisper. Climb a staircase, and that pressing force jumps to 3 or 4 times your body weight. And going down, coming back down those same stairs, it climbs higher still to something like 5 to 8 times your body weight. Going down is the harder climb. That surprises people. They think the effort is in the climb, because the climb is what makes them breathe hard. But the knee does not care about your breathing. The knee cares about the squeeze. And the squeeze is worst when you are lowering yourself, when the muscle is fighting gravity in reverse, acting like a brake instead of an engine. It gets more particular than that, more intimate. The squeeze is not spread evenly across the kneecap. It piles up on one side, the outer side, the side away from your other leg. On that outer facet, the contact force runs 4 to 6 times heavier than on the inner side. The pressure there has been measured at around 8 units of stress, against roughly 6 on the inside. So the joint is not just loaded. It is loaded lopsidedly, hammered a little harder on one edge every single step. And now you might think I have talked myself into a gloomy corner. If stairs pound the kneecap this hard, and pound it unevenly, and pound it worst on the way down, then surely the honest advice is to stay off the stairs and save your knees. That would be the tidy conclusion. And it is wrong. Watch how it falls apart. Because someone finally built a careful model of the knee, a fine computer reconstruction, and put 9 young men through it, and asked a question nobody had bothered to separate cleanly. Going up versus coming down, which actually presses harder, and where? And the answer had a twist folded inside it. Going up, at a deep bend of the knee, the peak pressure on the cartilage was a touch higher. Going down at a shallower bend, the peak pressure was a touch lower. So far, that sounds backward from what I just told you about descent being brutal. But here is the piece that resolves it. Going up, the kneecap sits deep and presses against a much larger patch of cartilage, a contact area about 3/4 larger than going down. And that matters enormously, because a force spread over a wide patch is gentle, and the same force crammed onto a small patch is vicious. It is the difference between a person standing on your foot in a flat shoe and the same person in a stiletto heel. Same weight. Completely different damage. So the descent, with its higher total joint reaction force pressed through a smaller patch of cartilage, is the one that tends to hurt first when a knee is starting to go bad. That is why in early arthritis, going down the stairs is the thing people flinch at before anything else. The knee is not lying to them. It is reporting a real concentration of stress. The staircase, it turns out, is running 2 different experiments on your knee depending on which way you point yourself, and your body can feel the difference even if you never had the words for it. Now I have shown you a heart that responds and a knee that pays a price, and you would think that is the whole story. 2 suspects, 1 benefit, 1 cost, close the file. But there is a third system in this stairwell, and it is the quietest of the 3, and it may be the one that matters most as the years pile up. Watch your own foot the next time you climb. For a real slice of every step, your entire body is balanced on 1 leg. Not 2. 1. This is not special to stairs. Even in ordinary walking across flat ground, you spend about 80% of the time supported on a single limb, teetering, catching yourself, teetering again. Walking is really a controlled series of near falls that you keep interrupting, and a staircase takes that hidden balancing act and sharpens it, because now the single leg is not just holding you up, it is hoisting you upward, at height, with less room for error and a longer way to fall. So think about what that means. Every stair step is a fast, forced, one-legged balance test. And your body has a whole secret department devoted to passing that test. Down in your ankles, in the little senses woven through the joints and muscles, there is a sense most people never name. Not sight, not hearing. The sense of where your own limbs are in space, in the dark, without looking. Your joint position sense. It runs constantly, silently feeding your brain a stream of tiny corrections faster than you could ever think them. And that sense, that ankle acuity, is tied directly to how well a person actually keeps their balance and moves through the world. When it fades, the failure does not show up when you are standing squarely on 2 feet. It hides there. It only shows itself when you are challenged, when you are balanced on 1 leg, wobbling, reaching for stability, which is exactly, precisely the demand a staircase makes of you over and over without ceremony several times a day. And here the case starts to feel bigger than knees and hearts, because that quiet balancing department is the one that decades from now decides whether an older person catches themselves or hits the floor. So we now have 3 suspects standing in the same narrow stairwell, a heart that rebuilds itself from short hard bursts, a knee that pays in pressure but pays differently up than down, and a balance system getting quizzed on 1 leg with every step. 3 systems, 1 ordinary act, and no obvious thread tying them together yet. A good detective feels it at this point. That itch, that sense that these 3 are not really 3 separate stories, that something underneath connects them. And to find it, we have to stop looking at single staircases and single knees, and pull back, all the way back to hundreds of thousands of human lives at once, and ask what the stairs did to them over years. That is where this case cracks open. So here is where the case cracks open, and I want you to picture the size of it. Somebody went and followed nearly 459,000 grown people, ages 38 to 73, and they watched them for 12.5 years. That is not a laboratory. That is a slice of a whole country living its ordinary life, going up and down its ordinary stairs. And when they added it all up, the people who climbed more than 5 flights a day, call it 50-odd steps, had about 20% less risk of the kind of heart disease where the arteries fur up and clog. 20%. From stairs. From the thing you grumble about when the elevator is broken. Now a suspicious mind, and by now you have one, says wait, that is not proof of anything. Maybe the healthy people climb stairs because they were already healthy. Maybe the stairs are just a thermometer, not a cause. Fair. That is exactly the objection a good detective should throw at the evidence. But watch what the same study did next, because this is the detail that made the hair on my neck stand up. They looked at the people who used to climb the stairs every day and then stopped. Not the people who never climbed. The people who quit. And those quitters had about 32% higher risk of heart disease than the folks who never bothered with stairs at all. Think about what that means. If the stairs were only a thermometer, quitting would just drop you back to the never climbed crowd. Instead, letting the habit go left people worse off than if they had never had it. That is not a thermometer. That is a thread you cut, and something unravels. The doing itself was carrying weight. So now the three suspects, the heart, the knee, the balancing act, are all standing there, and the population data has told us the stairs really do something across a whole life. But it still has not told us what the underlying thing is. Why should a few flights, a matter of a minute or two of actual effort, ripple out across a dozen years of a human being? Here is the clue that finally ties the knot. Somebody put motion trackers on about 25,000 people who described themselves as non-exercisers. People who never go to a gym, never lace up for a jog, and the trackers caught them anyway, in the wild, doing these tiny hard bursts. Running for the bus, carrying the groceries up fast, taking the stairs 2 at a time because they were late, bursts as short as 1 to 2 minutes. They gave it a clumsy name, vigorous intermittent lifestyle physical activity, but you can just call it the little sprints life forces on you. And the people who did about 3 of these little bursts a day, scattered through the day, had something like 38 to 40% lower risk of dying from any cause over the years, and close to half the risk of dying from heart disease. From bursts. From accidents of effort they did not even file under exercise. And then, because nature likes to twist the knife of surprise, an even newer look at a few thousand American adults went smaller still. The typical burst in that one lasted 10 seconds. 10. The whole daily total came to about 1 minute, and it still tracked with roughly 39% lower risk of dying, and more if the bursts came more often. 10-second efforts. That is 1 flight of stairs. That is the distance from your kitchen to your bedroom taken with a little urgency. Now put that beside the very first thing we found, all the way back at the start of this puzzle, those bored college students. Remember them, 36 young people, 1 4-minute bout on a 16-step flight, and their hearts climbed and their sense of effort shot up hard, but when you asked them afterward how they felt, whether they felt more energetic, less tired, the needle did not move. Their bodies had clearly been through something. Their minds shrugged and said, that was nothing. For the longest time in this investigation that looked like a contradiction. The heart screaming, the mind yawning. It is not a contradiction. It is the answer. That gap between what the body registers and what the mind notices is the whole secret of the case. Your conscious sense of exertion is a terrible instrument for measuring what actually matters to your tissues. The quadriceps hauling nearly 4 times your body weight through the kneecap does not send a memo to your mood. The heart vaulting toward its own ceiling in 90 seconds does not feel like an accomplishment, it just feels like being slightly out of breath at the top. The balancing organs in your ankles and inner ear, quizzed on one leg step after step, file no report you can read. The stimulus that reshapes the heart, that loads and feeds the cartilage, that keeps the balance circuits sharp, is over so fast and feels so minor that your mind throws the receipt away. And because it feels like nothing, you never guess it was the active ingredient. Brevity was never the weakness of stair climbing. Brevity is the mechanism. Short and hard is not a watered-down version of exercise. For the heart, short and hard near the ceiling is the concentrated form. That is why those 18 heart patients doing 3 90-second climbs touched 101% of their peak heart rate, while the long, slow group only reached about 89, and ended up with the same 17% gain in their oxygen ceiling as a much longer program. The intensity is the dose. The clock is almost a distraction. So what does the answer mean for the two suspects that were not just about the heart, the knee, and the aging body? Here the news turns kind, and I want to end on it, because the doom and gloom about knees is only half the truth. They took mobility-limited older adults, people already losing ground, and put them on a 12-week weighted stair climbing program. Not marathons, stairs, with a little load. And their stair climbing power went up about 12%. Their leg press power, 17%. Their ordinary walking speed improved by about 1/10 of a meter every second, which does not sound like much until you know that walking speed in an older person is one of the closest things we have to a measure of how much life is left in the legs. And that same leg power, the thing the stairs were building, turns out to be one of the better predictors of whether a person can stand steady and not fall. The heart, the knee, and the balance are not three separate stories after all. They are one system, and stair power feeds all three. And the knee, that suspect we half accused of being the victim, remember what it was doing. Going up, the pressure on the kneecap runs a hair higher, but the joint spreads that load across a contact patch, about 74% larger, smearing the force over more cartilage instead of stabbing it into one spot. Cartilage is not a passive shim. Load it sensibly, and it drinks in its fluid, it stays alive. The staircase is not simply wearing the knee down. Handled with a little sense, more going up than pounding down, it is exactly the kind of loading a joint is built to be fed. So walk back with me to where we started, to that ordinary stairwell you passed without a thought. It looked like nothing, a gap between two floors. But we have caught it in the act now. In the space of a few steps, it drives your heart toward its ceiling, it presses and feeds the cartilage in your knees, and it puts you again and again on a single leg and dares you to stay upright. Three of the deepest systems in a human body, interrogated all at once, in 15 seconds, by a piece of architecture so dull you resent it. The whole time you thought you were just going upstairs, the staircase was quietly running the most important experiment of your day. And the strangest part is the one the college students taught us. It will keep doing all of this, faithfully, for years, and it will never once let you feel how much it mattered.